Hello, thank you for joining us for a discussion on a consensus report led by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine entitled Strengthening Sustainability Programs and Curricula at the Undergraduate and Graduate Levels. My name is Erin. I'm the Director of Olympic and Paralympic Development in the Office of the Mayor of Los Angeles, as well as the Conrad and Hilton Foundation Fellow on the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm pleased today to be joined by my colleagues from our National Academies Committee, our chair, Dr. Erin Kapuscinski, the Director of Coastal Science and Policy Program, Professor of Environmental Studies at the University of California at Santa Cruz, Dr. Garrick Louie, Associate Professor, Engineering Systems and the Environment, University of Virginia, and Dr. Christopher Boone, Dean, College of the Global Futures, and Professor of the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University. So let's get started. Anne, could you share with us an overview of the study, its statement of task, and how we went forward?
Yes, I'd be pleased to do that, Erin, and welcome everybody to our panel. The committee was basically tasked with taking stock of the current practices and major advances in sustainability education at the undergraduate and graduate levels. As many of you probably know, there's a lot going on. There's a real burgeoning of the development of these programs. And then we were also asked to look at key competencies that are critical for sustainability education and identify strengths, gaps, and opportunities basically for improving both current programs in higher education and to also provide guidance to the many groups in the United States as well as around the world that are in the process of developing new programs or expanding maybe nascent programs that are addressing sustainability both at undergraduate and graduate levels. And we were asked to develop a set of recommendations. In order to do this, we decided that it was really important to get input from key stakeholders because people are so engaged in this arena and because there is so much activity going on. So we held 3 workshops that were purposefully designed to be participatory and to provide us public input into the study. One workshop was in Austin, Texas, one was in Washington, D.C., and one was in Santa Cruz. If I remember correctly, we ended up getting input from over 75 people. And the key thing was that we sought input from educators, students of sustainability programs, as well as alumni, and especially also from leaders in the workforce. The committee felt very early on in our planning of these workshops that we were especially interested in better understanding how much alignment or misalignment is there between what the educators are doing. They're very proactive and excited about sending new young leaders out into the workforce, but how well is that aligned with what the workforce actually wants? So after a lot of creative work and great interactions by this awesome committee and all the input that we got from the workshops, also staff helped us research existing literature. We also got some input from the federal government, specifically a group of Congress that has a bill on sustainability in higher education that's been before the Congress for a while. After all of that, we developed a set of recommendations, and they fall under 3 major themes. Recommendations for strengthening sustainability educational programs at the undergraduate and graduate levels, recommendations for building the academic environment for sustainability in higher education institutions, and recommendations for developing a sustainability workforce that can understand and address current and future sustainability challenges. If I were to give you like a 1-sentence summary of all our recommendations, I would say, and I've actually taken this from our press release, basically what we recommend is that higher education institutions should strengthen sustainability education programs by increasing interdisciplinarity, fostering experiential learning, and incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion, both into the curriculum content and into the student body and into the body of the faculty. And I could maybe give you a sense for one of the recommendations, which is one that maybe people often sort of think of implicitly, but are not as explicit about as they should be. And that was a recommendation under strengthening sustainability education programs. We recommend that there be really explicit attention paid to training students to understand the highly interdependent, varied, and complex context of sustainability, so that they can be able to discern and understand both the opportunities, but also the constraints that are presented to us today based on past historical trajectories, contemporary trajectories, to understand everything from the global policy context, the local policy context, how political economic factors drive this, how past problems of inequity and discrimination influence what we're able to do today and what people's perspectives are. And then also to be able to apply what they learn in experiential learning settings so that they really understand the different context of how you would advance sustainability outcomes if you're working in the private sector versus working in the government sector versus working a nonprofit, or to be able to understand the difference between working at a very local community level versus trying to influence things at a very international scale, for example, if you're involved with the United Nations. I can say more, but I think we should pass it on to other people.
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate it. I'll turn over to Garrick now. So as we record this in November 2020, the world is still reeling from the coronavirus. And in the US, this has been accompanied, and globally, has been accompanied by a reckoning around systemic inequity and racial justice. How do you think the reality of this moment has or will impact the recommendations in this report?
I think that in addition to COVID-19, which I'll talk about specifically, we also have some significant sort of social uprisings and social instability in the country surrounding the George Floyd killing and Black Lives Matter and the general upswelling for social justice and racial justice in the country. And so when that is packaged together with the inequitable impacts of COVID-19, I think it provides a very good learning opportunity for the students in the context of sustainability. One is that our actions don't just affect us, but that they affect other people at the same time. And so when we have things like the politicizing of the wearing of masks and taking actions to prevent the spread of the disease, students should be able to perceive that for what it is and to make their own independent judgments about what they should do and what is best based on the science. And so I think that that's one good offering that ties in COVID-19 to this whole idea of sustainability in a practical way. The other issue about social justice, which is a key dimension of sustainability education, is very important in this moment because we are living it on a day-to-day basis, but it's also very important to incorporate into sustainability programs and curricula in higher education, especially at the undergraduate and graduate level. And that's the subject of the report. We have to do that in many different ways. And the report goes into great length on some different methods and approaches and programs that we can use to accomplish those goals. So that generally, in summary, I would say, yes, the moment that we are in, especially with COVID-19, provides us a learning opportunity to care about each other and to see that as a dimension of sustainability education. And then two, to see this whole idea of giving and doing as essential to the concept of sustainability. And we'll have more. I know there's more to come later, but in the interest of time, I want to stop there and pass it on to someone else.
Thank you, Garrick. So Chris, let me turn to you. Some of these recommendations are already taking shape in higher education institutions around the world, but some will still require tremendous structural change. What do you think needs to happen to realize the report's recommendations?
So there's several recommendations that do address the context for making sure that sustainability programs are successful. And we have several recommendations, one of which is, and described earlier, making sure that we support and appreciate and recognize that sustainability is very interdisciplinary and it requires that kind of interdisciplinary structure in order to be successful. A lot of universities are still organized around disciplinary perspectives. And so that's one thing that universities are going to have to address. The other is to make sure, another recommendation, that there's support from senior leadership at the universities, because sustainability engages so many fields inside of universities and colleges. It's not something that a chair of one unit can support and hope to be able to promote across the entire university. It really does take leadership at the most senior levels to be successful. But because there's been this burgeoning of sustainability programs that on the one hand is quite welcome, but we think there's an opportunity now with the creation of so many sustainability programs to ask some very specific research questions, and also to invite many of those folks who've been involved with those to think about what kind of research do we need in order to make sure that we're, one, being successful, and to try to get a sense of where the field is going. So we made some very specific recommendations. One is, can we come together and try to understand how effective sustainability curricula are for achieving what we call program level goals, not just course level, but program level goals that contribute positively to communities of practice, along with impacts on activities within higher education institutions overall. So let's now take stock of whether or not these designs, and there are many, are actually being effective in terms of what they propose to do. The second is, and this is a tricky one, given the state of where things are, especially during times of COVID, is to understand the marketplace for sustainability jobs and pathways for students to secure those opportunities. There's very spotty data collection at the moment, and this is something that we struggled with as a committee. So we think there's a research opportunity here to try to get a better sense of what the marketplace looks like for graduates from these programs. The third is around the idea of core competencies and content areas. In sustainability programs nationwide and even globally, are they converging around some key competencies and ideas? It looks like that, but this is a legitimate hypothesis and research question. Or are they diverging, or are they otherwise evolving in ways that we need to be able to understand? And finally, how will these programs prepare students for a post-2030 agenda for sustainable development? The Sustainable Development Goals has a target date of 2030 that will soon be upon us. So how can we prepare students for what comes next, and how can faculty, students, and staff and partners actually think about what the post-30 goals will look like? The other thing I'll mention is something that Ann talked about early on, which is the Higher Education Sustainability Act. This was first authorized in 2010. We think there's a new opportunity, given the change of administration, to reinfuse resources, especially for minority serving institutions. We want to make sure that, to the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, that all voices are incorporated, because that's where innovation and creativity happens. So our hope is that we'll be able to potentially influence things at the federal level to provide better support for sustainability education across the board.
Erin,
Yes,
may
go ahead,
I add something to what Chris said? I think that Chris mentioned it, and so did Ann. The whole idea of bringing the element of justice and social justice into this as a strong recommendation from the report. And one thing we need to do within the academy is to diversify the field of sustainability in all the ways that it's offered. And that means diversifying the student body, diversifying the faculty, and engaging students more in this exchange on all the issues related to sustainability, and giving them that perspective at the local level, that is where they live or where they go to school, but also engaging them in the global context of sustainability, especially as it relates to the way the Sustainable Development Goals are being accomplished in different contexts across the world, whether it be in the higher income countries, which are looking at ways of greening their energy supply, to the lowest income countries, where people are more concerned about the basic needs of access to safe water and sanitation and food and shelter and other kinds of issues like that. And then the other piece that I think we need to bring out is the engagement of the institutions that fund sustainability research and other forms of research, like places like the National Science Foundation, places like the Department of Energy. All of these need to be brought into the program, along with the industrial partners, in strengthening the whole curriculum approach to sustainability at the undergraduate and graduate levels. So I just wanted to add those elements to connect the initial comments from Ann and the points that Chris just raised.
No, I think that's excellent. And I would add to that in the context of local government, obviously from which I sit as being a real true platform for bringing a lot of local interests together, whether those are universities coupled with community groups, coupled with kind of local government's ability to influence and make change in the lives of our residents here. And so we're seeing that take shape as we move forward on the Sustainable Development Goals, and equity is really at the key of the SDGs as captured by the Leave No One Behind motto. But I think we can do better than that. I think we can do better than not just leaving people behind. But let me turn now to Anne to kind of wrap us up here. Can you share with us what you see as the next steps for this report and its recommendations, and what type of response have you seen so far?
I think in a nutshell, the next step is that everybody who's interested in sustainability in higher ed and who has been involved with the report or is listening to us should do everything you can to spread the word in your networks so that people are aware of the varied recommendations. And also, I think, a great thing this report did was just pull together a lot of existing knowledge and understanding from a lot of different dimensions of this, all the dimensions that we've been talking about so far. So for example, we held recently a panel at the ASHE conference, and we got great reception in that panel, the people who attended our panel. Additionally, it turned out there were so many different groups proposing to have a session on core competencies in sustainability, and we do have a set of recommendations on competencies. If that led to the creation of an ongoing discussion group in ASHE, and one of our committee members, Chris, has been able to participate in that. So that's a great opportunity for some of our recommendations to be considered by that group. We are also hoping, we know that that NCSE is facilitating this new community of practice called the Alliance of Sustainability and Environmental Academic Leaders. So I really encourage that any of you who are attending this panel and are involved with that alliance, please spread the word and encourage people to look at our report. This might be a good moment for me to pause and point out that we structured a lot of our recommendations to not be so much prescriptive, saying thou shalt do this with your sustainability program, but more lay out frameworks and guidance and things to consider in order to provide the flexibility that's needed across the huge diversity of kinds of programs that people are engaged with. So we really hope that there's something in the report for people who are at various stages of developing their programs and are coming at it from different starting points and with different emphases. Additionally, the Academy is planning to do some additional events, and we don't know the date yet, but we're hoping to have some kind of a town hall release event, which might have some breakout discussion groups just to draw more attention. And in addition to spreading the word within the United States, there's also opportunities and a lot of interest globally. So we've already been approached by a colleague who's involved with the UNESCO Global Independent Expert Group on Universities in the 2030 Agenda. That's a long name, but basically it's a group that's interested in making sure that universities around the world are doing things that can really feed into the 2030 Agenda. And we've been invited to present on our report. So we're very excited about that. So bottom line, spread the word. Please share the ideas and think of our report as a great compilation of a lot of different things to consider and that can help inform what you're doing.
Thank you, Anne. So on behalf of my colleagues, I want to thank you for joining us in this conversation. We would also like to thank the National Academies, and specifically our study director, Lita Benenson, and our associate program officer, Emmy Kameyama, as well as staff including Austin Applegate, Paula Whitaker, and the Director for Science and Technology for Sustainability, Franklin Carrera Martinez, as well as the sponsors of this report, the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation, and the George and Cynthia Mitchell Endowment for Sustainability at the National Academy of Sciences. So to access the report, please visit this QR code on the site or click through on the link provided at the National Academies page. Thank you for joining us, and please check it out.